afternoon. I'm Vineet Chaudhary. Here today on this forum, we are talking of free trade. And my question is to the respected minister. While you have been road showing India all across the world with the spirit of exporting from India, here back home, the government industry, which is the public sector, is, I would say, until this day, closed to imports. What is your opinion on this?
Well, India is not merely an exporter. That was in '91 when we were looking for generating foreign exchange. Today, with our huge reserves of foreign exchange, India is a major importer. And if we look at statistics, and even the statistics with the United States, our imports are going up at the rate of 35%. And our imports are between 20 and, our imports are going up by 35%. And our exports are going up by 25%. India is today a very big importer. And when you say the public sector is not importing, I really do not get in what context you're saying that, but public sector today, there is no prohibition on the public sector. It's again competitiveness. In fact, we are grappling with the situation where the manufacturing industries in India are saying that you are making it difficult for us to sell in India. We much rather, when there's a global tender, and this is of a public sector corporation, they said when they import, it's cheaper to them. When we, in India, when a public sector company is to buy from India, they are finding that it's more expensive because of the Indian taxes, because of the transactional costs, because of levies at even a state government level, which are not refunded to them. And when they're importing, so they said it's better for us. This is a classic case on which we are doing a study where manufacturers in India say it's better to export to Sri Lanka and from Sri Lanka to import it back to India. We'll find ourselves more competitive that way. So there is no embargo on public sector imports. And gradually, as we brought our tariffs down in the last budget, a fortnight ago, approximately, we brought down our peak rates of tariffs from 10%. And if we look at capital goods, our tariff structure today is 5, 7.5, and 10, except in certain areas, in textiles, in automobiles, and in things like wines and spirits. Our tariffs are high. But otherwise, across the board, with low tariffs, again, it's a question of competitiveness. If competitiveness, we are seeing this great problem in investment also, where India is competing for investment with Vietnam, as Mr. Prestowitz said, that now with capital grants, with tax breaks for setting up industry in other countries in East Asia. In India, we're not doing what Vietnam is doing. In India, we're not doing what, say, Cambodia is doing, what Philippines is doing, what Indonesia is doing. In incentivizing incentive, it's a big challenge for us to grapple with it. At the same time, competitiveness is now dictating where you will buy from.
Import-export policy and strategy point of view. But reality grassroots is, if you look at, I would say 50% of the global tenders, they say companies from international community who have been supplying in the past to XYZ, which is Indian public sector undertakings, when you put such a pre-qualification condition, really speaking, no new entrant can enter that system.
You're talking about price preference, which is given. Is
no,
that?
not price, not even price, okay.
In qualification.
In pre-qualification. If, for example, I name Coal India, tender after tender, they will say in pre-qualification, if you have supplied to Coal India, SECL, NCL, or other Government of India coal subsidiaries, only then you pre-qualify. Otherwise, you don't qualify, which means they really block you to enter. It's the mindset of our public sector.
Well, that's the biggest problem we have. You can change your laws. You can sometimes even change your constitution. How do we change mindsets? I'm not saying that lightheartedly. In fact, that is one of the most, how do you change attitudes? When we talk of reforms, when we talk of everything, of change, the most difficult thing to change becomes attitude. When people come to me and they say, you know, you said this in your policy, but then when we go to that officer, he says, okay, policy is there. I must tell you what happened when we computerized. When we computerized import and export and put it on the net, it's all IT connected. So somebody was saying that, why have it IT connected? Because the customs officer tells us that, listen, this is all very well, but I need to see the face of that importer. Until I see his face, what will this net do, you know? And again, it's attitude. So I think that attitudinal change is taking place. All I can say is that, and in the specific thing of coal, I can only tell you I'll have a look at that, why it is so, and there must be some rationale in it. Is it because they have this inhibition of import, or they have this inhibition about something or the other, which I can't tell you right now.
Would you like to add to that?
Underline a point that Minister Nath made, which is that the structure of Indian trade and the profile of India's accounts is entirely different from those of East Asia. India is not running a trade policy aimed at accumulating current account surpluses. And I don't know about the specifics of openness in particular industries, but generally speaking, India presents the profile of a pretty much market-driven open economy. I do believe that India is being disadvantaged by the policies of East Asia. I believe that the currency management of East Asia and the investment incentives that are being offered by many countries around the world are to the detriment of India.
I would really add to that very briefly by saying that currency calibration is what really when he said that Hank Paulson has gone around. I fully back Hank Paulson in getting China to reform its currency calibration, which they do, because your competitiveness is driven by currency calibration, which is being done very largely by China. And as Mr. Prestowitz said, that it's India's growth is domestic market driven. China's growth is export market driven.
Yeah, I'm Ravindra Agrawal. My question is to Mr. Prestowitz. He just said that US is consuming more and producing less. That's why they are net consumers. As a result, the world should think in those manner, that they are the net consumers. Well, sir, let me know whether this consumption is competitiveness driven. Is it not more profitable for US to produce less and consume from outside world, because then they can have that resources available for their technological driven growth? As in India, we are also net importers and we are having less exports, but it is for our GDP growth and for the growth of the economy. How you say this, that just because America is a net consumer, the world should think in those terms, otherwise the consumption will reduce?
Good question. Two quick responses. One is that an economy needs consumers and producers. If you know, you can't have an economy that's all production and no consumption, or all consumption is no production. So you got to have both. The difficulty I see in the world economy today is that there's kind of a lack of consumers. The U.S. is a net consumer, India is a net consumer, but there are not enough net consumers in the world. Now, you make the point that, okay, but this could be profitable, and in that regard, I think there's a big difference, actually, between India and the U.S. India is running a current account deficit and covering that with inflow of capital or domestic savings, and investing in new productive facilities which will enhance productivity in the future. In the U.S., there are no savings. We are financing our consumption by importing foreign capital, which is not being invested in productive facilities. So effectively, Americans are mortgaging their future, or the future of their children. And we've seen just in the last couple of weeks a little scare when the Shanghai market fell. unraveling of the carry trade from Japan, all of these send shivers through the world economy because what the Americans are doing is not sustainable.
United States of America is having more borrowing today. Like an individual, if he borrows more, he can become bankrupt. Same happens to corporate. If he borrows substantially more, they can go for bankruptcy. And US also is doing the same at the moment. What happens now if East Asia doesn't politically support United States of America and they continue to manage their currency, it may so happen that ultimately dollar will get devalued. And if dollar gets devalued, I think India, which is very open and transparent, might suffer because then our exports will suffer in India and there could be imbalance in the world. Where do you see this imbalance if politically, as United States, manages politically everything in the world, is not able to manage China, Japan, Korea, what will happen? Will there be imbalance in the world?
Yes. 2 points. One is Paul Volcker, the former chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve, made a statement recently in which he predicted a 75% chance of a global financial crisis within the next 4 years. I believe that the dollar will devalue by between 50 and 70% on a trade-weighted basis sometime within the next 5 to 7 years. I don't know exactly what the timing is, but I believe that there has to be a big dollar devaluation. And I can already see a move away from the dollar. Many smaller central banks are limiting their dollar reserves and moving into euros or Canadian dollars or other assets. China, as you know, is putting together an investment fund in order to begin investing its reserves in something other than U.S. treasuries. There's already an understanding that just buying U.S. treasuries is not a good path for the future. And all of that suggests to me an eventual move away from the dollar.
Thank you.